All right, welcome to episode 1 of the BuddyPet podcast, where we discuss animal health and wellness topics with our very own head of animal health and vet, Dr. Elsa Rutherford. Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Today, we're going to be discussing a big topic. Actually, that's a big one in humans, but did you also know that your pets can suffer from anxiety? So, right off the bat, let's go. Why do dogs get anxiety?
Dogs get anxieties are pretty much for all the same reasons that people do. Naturally, they're really social animals. And so we, as their sort of pet family, we're their pack. So we see things like separation anxiety. If those dogs are left on their own, they're used to being in a pack, so they don't like that on the whole. So separation anxiety is a really common one. The other kind of things we see commonly would be things like storm phobias and fireworks, so those loud noises. And then the other reason dogs get anxieties, again, is really similar to humans. If they've had a past traumatic event, so if, for example, they've been out on a walk and they've been attacked by another dog, they may develop a fear surrounding that breed or size of dog, or they may develop an anxiety about going out for a walk in general. So it's really similar to humans in the way these things develop.
That's pretty wild, actually. We're so similar to our furry friends.
Yeah.
And I guess the next one is like, does my dog have anxiety, and how can I tell that he or she has anxiety?
Again, like a lot of the symptoms, I think we can probably quite easily recognize. And I think maybe we'll take separation anxiety because it's one that I think a lot of people have a lot of questions about, and we're seeing a lot more of it for reasons that we'll probably go into. But the common things would be whining and barking. Those are sort of, they're vocalizing their anxieties, and things like pacing, sort of pacing around, sort of not settling, I guess. A lot of dogs will also drool. They'll salivate if they're really, really anxious. That's a really common thing. That's a really high level of anxiety if we see that. If dogs are left alone, so this is where we're talking about separation anxiety, or if they're in the house alone when a thunderstorm develops, then a lot of dogs will become really destructive. So that's one that can be sometimes a bit more difficult to understand. As humans, we just think that dog is behaving badly. They've chewed the couch, they've ripped the cushions apart, or they've scratched at the door and destroyed something. And we've just got to be really careful to recognize that that's often a sign that they're really distressed. They're not bored or being naughty. Often that's a sign of real anxiety. So those are really common ones. And then the other thing, and this is where cats also do this, cats probably more commonly will overgroom themselves. So what we call self-trauma. So they'll lick, and you'll just see that as patches of hair loss, and you may think that they have a skin disorder when in fact they're actually over grooming themselves because they're stressed. And the other thing that cats do more commonly than dogs, but dogs also do this when they're stressed, is toilet in odd places. So people might say, oh, my cat's peed by the back door, or they've peed on the couch, or something which is really out of character. And yes, that can mean a medical issue, like a urinary tract issue. But often, once we've ruled those kind of things out, we're looking at whether this could be an anxiety issue for those animals.
For sure. So with the pandemic, I mean, we all spent so much time with our pets, me included. So separation anxiety is obviously going to be a huge thing for our pets right now, especially now, just as we start to kind of move away from the pandemic slightly and we go more into the office. How are you going to help your dog overcome this separation anxiety?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and you're right. We're definitely seeing a lot more of that, because some of these pets people have only got them during the pandemic, so they've never known anything different. So as people are going back to the office and back out and about, these animals being left on their own, there's quite a lot of things that we can do. And the aim really with any kind of therapy for any problem that we have is always to start with the things that cause least harm, start with the things that don't have side effects, and then work our way up depending on what's working. And no one thing works for every single animal. You've got to try things and tailor those effects. So things that have been shown to be of some benefit would be, so supplements, we're talking about the omega-3 fatty acids. So you find that they are known for their really strong anti-inflammatory actions, and they have anti-inflammatory actions that work around the brain. There's also lots of flavonoids in various plant products. So we're talking sort of we're talking things like hemp seed oil, which we'll get further into in a sec, but a lot of the plant chemicals have been shown in humans to help with things like PTSD and anxieties in the lab situation. They've got sort of proven effects. So we're talking about things like fish oils, hemp seed oils, many of the other oils that will have sort of high levels of omega-3 fatty acids. And BuddyPet has a range of hemp seed oils. They're all cold pressed organic hemp seed oils. Marley is the pure 100% hemp seed oil that can potentially have some benefit with anxieties in both cats and dogs. We do have a cat specific oil called Luna. The reason there's a different one for cats is that cats have a really different metabolism to dogs, and they can't get the same benefit of the oils. They can't extract and metabolize in the same way as dogs. So they do actually need a certain component of animal-based omega-3 fatty acids in their diet. So the BuddyPet Luna for cats has hemp seed oil and fish oils in it, and that's the reason why. So if you're going to try these kind of things for your pets, you need to try them for at least probably 2 to 4 weeks to see if they're going to have any benefit. And you need to be fairly methodical in sort of categorizing whether you're seeing these symptoms or not. Otherwise, you might try it for a month and then you can't really decide whether it's working or not. And if it's not working, you need to move on to something else. And if it is working, you need to sort of be sure in your mind that it is working. So supplements like the hemp seed oil definitely can be a benefit. Physical things that you can use would be things like these, they call them like thunder shirts, these wrap vests. This is really more for dogs, where they have a jacket that puts a little bit of pressure on their body. And what that does is it releases endorphins. It's like having a big hug. And so it's releasing endorphins and making those dogs feel safe. And again, you have to train them. You can't just throw that thing on if they've never been used to it, because otherwise that in itself can cause anxieties. But those kind of things that are physical things can help. And then there's various other herbal supplements, things like ashwagandha, valerian root, chamomile. These are all sort of fairly proven herbal supplements that have been shown to help in various different forms of anxiety. So those are the kind of things that you can do that aren't sort of drugs per se. And then moving on to other things, you've got, there are a few kind of commercial collars that dogs wear that will contain pheromones. And these pheromones are like smells that only dogs can smell. And they sort of constantly release this smell, and it has a calming effect on them. It's a chemical version of something that a female dog releases when she has puppies, and it helps to calm those puppies. So there's a collar version for a dog. And then for cats, there's also like a diffuser type of version that you plug into a normal socket, and that releases that smell for cats in the home situation. So you've got those kind of things that you can do. If those aren't working, then you move on to more like drug therapies, and that includes things like CBD, which I think we'll talk about in another video. But CBD also, it works in a completely different way to hemp seed oil, but CBD has definitely been proven to help with anxieties. And then if that's not working, then you're looking at sort of other drug therapies. But they need to be given in conjunction with what we would call a behavioral modification program. So behavioral modification programs are all about changing that behavior, giving your pet the tools to deal with the anxiety, as well as, if they need drugs in the short term to reduce that anxiety and allow them to sort of take on that information, then that's what needs to be done. But in the long run, they actually need to be trained to deal with this event. So it's things like deconditioning, desensitization, counter conditioning, to try and get these dogs and cats to have, to not perceive these things as anxiety inducing events, so that they are able to be left on their own and they don't suffer. So it's quite a long process to do that. You have to be pretty dedicated, but it has really good outcomes if you can do that. The other thing, just going back to dogs, is like people with anxieties, getting adequate exercise is something that people, I think, it's sort of almost discounted. It's so important that they get adequate exercise as well, that they get adequate stimulation, and if you can exercise your dog regularly, it in itself can help reduce anxieties.
Great, yeah, that's some great advice right there. How would you treat dogs with severe anxiety?
So if you've tried, so dogs that have severe anxiety, and these are the ones that we're talking about that have, they're self-trauma, so they're chewing themselves, they're destroying things in the house, they're so anxious that they just can't do anything else, they can't settle. These are the kind of dogs that you may have tried some of the more gentler approaches, the supplements, the physical things, you're exercising them regularly, all of those things, and it's still not working. That's when you need to speak to your vet. It's important that you do that, because really these dogs, most of the time, they're going to need some form of medication, not necessarily in the long term. So often these dogs, if you can put them on medication in the short term, just to reduce those anxiety levels, then in conjunction with what we'd call a behavioral modification program, which is a program where you help to counter condition these animals and desensitize them to whatever is the fear inducing, the anxiety inducing issue, then often they can be weaned off those medications. Some dogs do need to be on medication long term, and cats as well need to be on these medications long term. And if that's what they need, then that's what they need. But in a lot of cases, you can train these issues out of them over a period of time with professional help, in conjunction with the medications.
Yeah, for sure. So how about people that want to go more like the natural route with their pets? How can they help their pets with like natural remedies?
So there's lots of things available, and again, these range depending on what type of anxieties and how severe those anxieties are. There's a range of different things. So starting at the more mild end of the spectrum, you've got things like the omega-3 fatty acids that are found in many oils have been shown to help with a lot of mild anxieties. So we're talking fish oils, hemp seed oils, those kind of things. And then at the sort of slightly more severe sort of side of the anxieties, then you move on to things like CBD oil. So CBD has been is really quite exciting. As it becomes legalized in many more countries and in many more states, in those countries, you're seeing a lot more use of it and really seeing some very good effects for anxiety. There's also lots of herbal remedies as well that can help. So you need to talk to a specific herbalist to get a really good kind of formulation for these, but we're talking things like valerian root, chamomile, ashwagandha, and those kind of things. And people have been using like something called Bach's rescue remedy for years. It's quite an old or long-standing for these things. So there are lots of alternative things that are out there that can be done.
Great. So you mentioned hemp seed oil specifically. How can hemp seed oil help with anxiety in pets?
So hemp seed oil has a really optimal ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. And it's these fatty acids that really have been shown to help with a lot of the anxieties. They have anti-inflammatory and sort of antioxidant properties that help with neural inflammation. And so just the general kind of neural processing pathways can be improved by supplementation of these omega-3 fatty acids. The other thing that hemp seed oil contains is a lot of the flavonoids in there, which are these sort of plant chemicals, have been shown to help specifically with anxiety in people. And although the studies haven't necessarily come through for animals yet, there are a lot of similarities and a lot of things will cross over. So we're expecting that some of the actions of hemp seed oil may come through that as well, and the evidence, it will come later, but certainly the anecdotal evidence that we have would show that hemp seed oil definitely can help support these milder cases of anxiety in cats and dogs. In cats, they're a little bit different. They can't metabolize the same nutrients from the hemp seed oil alone. So cats, they do need some fish oils too.
Awesome. So before you mentioned that taking your dog on walks and just giving them plenty of exercise is great for anxiety. So how exactly does this ease the anxiety on your dog?
Exactly the same way as humans. So, in humans, it releases that sort of, any kind of exercise releases those natural endorphins, and they have that sort of calming effect on the whole body. You feel good after exercising, and it's the same as dogs. Plus, there's the stimulation of seeing a different environment. If your dog's inside all day, seeing the same four walls, it's like you sitting at a desk in an office. You see the same four walls, and then you go out and you have a run and you see, you see nature and you feel good. It's the same thing with dogs. It's exactly the same kind of thing. It's that feeling good. And for cats, obviously a little bit different. You can't force cats to do anything, never mind exercise. But for cats, they get that release of endorphins through stimulation. So you can still enrich their environment. So by having lots of toys and lots of climbing routes and escapes for them to have, and also just interacting with your cat, stroking your cat has the same action of releasing endorphins as well. So there's lots of things you can do for cats as well.
Oh, wow, that's some good information right there. I think I'll go pet my cat later. Especially if it's going to help with anxiety.
You and your cat.
So does neutering a dog help with anxiety?
That's quite a controversial question, really. The short answer is yes and no. It does, in some cases, it can help. If you're new to that animal, it depends on the source of their anxieties and how severe they are. From a point of view of other health benefits, it can certainly help for other reasons, but there is no hard and fast yes or no for that. So some animals, if you lower those kind of sex hormones, which is what happens when you neuter them, sometimes actually causes the inverse problem. They actually become more anxious because of where they sit in the hierarchy with other non-desexed animals. So it's a really tricky one. And unfortunately, the only way you're going to know is after it's happened, after you've neutered your animal. There are one or two ways you can kind of test these days before you actually physically neuter an animal. You can what we call chemically, especially for males, you can chemically neuter them, which means an injection or like a little implant that will just reduce those, like suppress those hormone levels. And that will give you an idea of how their behavior may be if you were to physically neuter them. So that's one thing you can do beforehand, but there's no guarantees.
Okay, so you briefly touched on anxiety vests for dogs. So do those work?
Again, they work really well for some animals and not for others. So all of these kind of things, it's a really individual thing, and you've just got to try a few different things so you find what works for your particular pet. But these shirts, they work in a way, they're like a vest or a jacket that particularly for dogs, it's, again, cats, there'd be very few cats that you could persuade to wear one of these things. So we're talking dogs, really. but they're like a vest or a shirt that they wear that just compresses their body a little bit. It's like having a really close hug. And so what that does is, again, releases natural endorphins, makes that dog feel sort of surrounded, secure, and reassured. So for some dogs, it works really, really well. And it can work well both if they're left on their own in the house. So we're talking separation anxiety, with storm phobias, and also out and about. So if the dog's issue is out walking, then sometimes these vests do really help.
Awesome. So you actually see a lot of these vests, at least in the US, because of a lot of fireworks, especially in July.
Yep.
How do you calm your cat or dog, like during thunderstorms or fireworks, those like loud explosive sounds?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. And thankfully, like we don't in Australia, there's not so many fireworks, but we certainly do have a lot of thunderstorms. So firstly, dogs and cats can, so with regards thunderstorms, they can sense that sort of the change in the barometric pressure. So, if you've got a dog or a cat, you often that is fearful, you can see before there's a thunderstorm happening that one's going to happen, because their behavior changes, and they can feel that pressure way before we can. And one of the first things to do is to make sure that pet, your dog or cat, has somewhere safe that they can hide. What you don't want to do is take away their natural ability to protect themselves and do what they need to do. You don't want to force them to be exposed to these things, because that's just going to make their anxiety worse. You need to give them somewhere to hide. So if we're talking cats, we're talking somewhere up high, because cats feel much safer when they're up high, and a sort of fairly enclosed space. So usually like a box where they can only see out of one side, something that's dark, that they have the vantage point from up high, and that they can feel safe. Same with a lot of dogs. A lot of dogs actually do quite well if they have like a little den or somewhere to hide in. So even if you don't have something like that, you can put a big blanket or sheet or something around a table, so they have like a little space under the table where they can hide and feel safe. Often putting on a TV or a radio and putting that volume up can help, so you're almost trying to mask the noise of the thunder or the fireworks. So that can be really helpful for some animals. Trying not to kind of pull them out, drag them out, just let them, just reassure them, but let them hide themselves. So those are sort of physical things that you can do. From a point of view of so obviously things like fireworks and even thunderstorms, often we do know that they're coming, and so you can predict that as well, and that's where the supplements and things can help. So again, that's where you can give them things like the hemp seed oil, CBD, the herbal formulations, or the medications. If they're on medications, you can give those preemptively. These things always work better if given preemptively. Don't wait till it's happening. If you know it's going to happen, give something beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought we'd end this podcast on something that is probably on a lot of people's minds, because I know I have some neighbors that have very, very yappy dogs, and I know growing up I was probably the neighbor with a yappy dog. How do you deal with the constant dog yapping and barking because of separation anxiety?
Yeah, look, it's in an urban situation, unfortunately it's quite a common thing and a common source of complaints and sort of inter-neighborly problems as well. So I guess firstly I'd say you have to look at it from the dog's, from my point of view. Let's look at it from the dog's point of view. That they're obviously really stressed, so people tend to get quite frustrated when dogs do this, and they get angry, and really we need to look at this and say, why is that dog barking? They're barking because they're stressed, because they don't want to be left on their own. And this comes back around to some of the earlier things we talked about, which is you need to try and give these dogs the tools to deal with being on their own. They're obviously just not coping. They're barking because they're not coping. And these are the kind of dogs where really that behavioral modification program is really, really important. You need to try and give these dogs, like you need to try and counter condition them to you leaving the house, you know. So dogs pick up on these cues that we give that we're leaving the house, and they don't know how long you're going for, whether it's going to be an hour, whether it's going to be all day, or whether you're going on holiday and you're away for a week. You know, they pick up on you, you know, picking up a bag. Car keys are particularly triggering. You know, they recognize the sound of the keys. They know that means, you know, my human is going out and I don't know when they're coming back. So these kind of dogs, it's all of the kind of things that we've talked about. You need to work out what's going to work for them, but getting plenty of exercise, super important. So if your dog's a barky dog, you might need to try and, if it means you getting up super early to walk them and try and exhaust them before you go out, that's what you need to do. So a lot of most dogs need at least 2 walks a day. So if you're not doing that, that's number one thing. Make sure they've got enough exercise, because then they'll be hopefully sufficiently tired that they're not going to want to just bark while you're out. Assuming that they are getting enough exercise, then make sure they've got enough stimulation while you're out. You know, could be potentially quite a boring day for your dog if you're out all day working. And one of the things you can do is, and this applies for cats as well, is have like treat toys. You know, these kind of toys where instead of feeding them 2 meals a day, you might spread their meal out into all these little toys where you stuff food. So they have to spend half the day trying to get little pellets or, you know, paste or whatever food you put in there. They have to be trying to get these, you know, get this food out. So it gives them, it's occupying them. For cats, it means having toys that they can play with, so they're not sort of, you know, they're not bored while you're out. So those are the sort of basic things that you need to do. And then if that's still not working, then you look at, again, having supplements on board. So looking at your omega-3 fatty acid supplements in hemp seed oil, looking at herbal remedies to just help calm your dog or your cat. And then if those aren't working, then you work your way up to, you know, potentially drug therapy if needed. But what you don't want to do is, a lot of people use anti-bark collars, and they're not really a solution. They're just tackling the symptoms, but really you need to get to the solution. Why is your dog barking? And it's usually that anxiety, in which case you've just got to tackle the anxiety from the root. Try and give them the tools to not be anxious.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely be sending my neighbors this part of the podcast for sure. All right, so that wraps up anxiety. Thank you for your time today, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Fantastic, thanks.